is full of, there's this one guy who is at a lot of things that I do when they're in DC or in DC, I guess. Apparently I do a lot of things in DC, and he's drawn like 6 vaguely like me portraits of me while I've been reading, and I carry them all with me because I don't know what to do with them.
Can you show? I just saw that one. That looked pretty good.
It's not bad. This one, red. Yeah, there was another one. There were like, maybe I lied. Maybe there was only that one, and I keep, every time I tell the story, I make it a bigger number of portraits of me. There are 10 portraits of me. Sorry, go ahead. So,
yeah, any questions?
If anybody has any questions?
Hey, that was really beautiful.
That was beautiful
Yeah.
too, what you did.
What you did.
The thing that you did.
Yeah, I love it.
I love it too. So where do you get your ideas?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
How do one get into screenwriting for companies like Warner Brothers?
I don't know how you get into companies like that. Somebody read this novel and then asked somebody to ask me if I wanted to write for the movies. And I said, who wouldn't? But it's not for anybody specifically. It's just scripts that we try to then put together, packages that we then try to get the people to buy.
I'll tell you this.
Yeah,
I wrote for Warner Brothers, and I just got lucky. I wrote a really funny script. I say it was really funny, and it sounds like I'm bragging. I was working with other guys who are much funnier than I am, and I worked with them. And we wrote it, and Warner Brothers read it. How you get into that is really hard. I mean, like Manuel got into it, through his novel, and that's what he got. I got into it because I was writing some screenplays at the time. And then, yeah, you find like an agent. Actually, Austin's a pretty great town for sneaking into screenwriting because there's so much indie work being done here, which is fantastic. And then you have festivals like the Austin Film Festival, which just happened last weekend, which is a writer-centric film festival. Most film festivals sort of celebrate distribution or directors or stars, but this really celebrates the writers. And there's a lot of agents and managers who are excited to get your work, and then, as Manuel was saying, build these packages and send it and put it in front of people.
Is the film festival where they have the screenwriting competition
They
every
do.
year?
Yeah, they have a really good film writing. So it's like screenwriting, television writing contests, and you can submit your scripts. And it's not just the winners who celebrated. There's all these different rounds, and that does get you a chance to like meet managers and meet people who are excited either about making films or introducing you to people who have the finances to make films.
Before all that, it's just writing a lot. I
That's.
don't know if this microphone is even on. No, it's not.
It's got. There's an emphasis to it. It's like poetic.
So
Writing
you're
a
just
lot.
writing a lot and getting people to read you work and tell you what you're doing wrong.
The creative writing department offers screenwriting classes online and in person at Austin Community College, so that would be a good first start. And I can tell you how to get signed up for that.
There we go.
There you go. I can talk to Charlotte in the
Yeah.
back after the, or right now if you want to just ignore the rest of the things that we're going to say. Any other questions? Yeah?
So, what tips do you have to try to make your stories stand out from other books in the same market?
Do you want to go or you want me to try and go?
I'll go first because you'll have a better one. So,
All right,
I wouldn't worry about trying to make your story stand out. George Saunders, who's one of my very favorite writers for his writing and for his personality, he talks about basically that if you try and if everyone here tried to write a story about a pencil, no one would write the same story. Unless they were trying to write the same story, and even then they'd fail. So just write your own stuff. Try and imitate other people if that's where you are. Do your best imitation of Flannery O'Connor or Kurt Vonnegut. You'll still be your own. But I wouldn't worry about trying to make something stand out. Just make the best thing possible. Cut out the parts that aren't good and keep the great stuff. And that should be enough. Your personality will make it, and style will make it stand out.
Yeah, and also the way that you stand out is by connecting to readers in terms of story and character and the emotional weight that you bring to all of that. And the way you capture that is by writing down to particular concrete details that are emotionally relevant to you. So you shouldn't worry about writing to an audience, you should worry about writing to yourself in terms of, this is the story that I want to read, this is the story that I want to hear, not just the story that I want to tell, but this is the way I would want to hear it and want to read it. And digging down into the particulars of how your story is important to you as a writer and a reader. And that will make it connect on a very universal way to a lot of readers, even if it has nothing to do with their own personal lives. The emotional kernel of it will resonate. There's a writer, Garth Greenwell, whose novel is basically, he grew up in Kentucky, gay, and in a position where he was one of the only gay people that he knew, and he had a very fractious relationship with his father. He left to teach abroad, and then his father got sick, so he had to come back to Kentucky and deal with the ramifications of having experienced this freedom and then coming back to Kentucky and still being the person that he was. And as he was writing this story, he was telling me, he was like, nobody is going to want to read this book because it's so personal to me. This is going to, like, who's going to care about this story except for me? But time after time, while he was on book tour, people would come up to him and they would tell him how amazed they were that he captured their experience so beautifully. Like, everything he wrote spoke to them in this very deep and personal way. And it's not because he was trying to reach out to, he was just trying to tell the story that was very personal to him. And that's what made it feel universal to anybody else who picked it up. And they could recognize the tone and tenor of their own lives through that kind of writing.
I knew you'd have a good answer. That was a good one.
I'm a professor.
Yeah. I sell scripts to Warner Brothers. Next question.
You're buying the drinks. Any other questions?
So I think it was an interview with, I think, Otessa Moshfegh or something recently. She was talking about, she became a novelist and kind of in long form started to think of writing more cinematically. So given that you all have many talents and different forms kind of in your toolkit, is it ever kind of a decision point for you in terms of which medium you're going to pursue, or do you often find them bleeding together?
What a good question. Do you have an answer to that?
The ideas usually present themselves as the thing that they're going to be. Like, rarely have I come up with an idea and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should write this as a short story or as a novel or as a screenplay. Like, it just feels very much like the thing that it's supposed to be, just because. And it's kind of hard for me to articulate why a short story comes to me and feels like a short story. Because usually I'm like, well, like, the short story itself can be contained, whereas some ideas feel too big for a short story. But there are plenty of short stories that contain big ideas and they just are compressed into this small space, so that it's not like an actual...
The idea just sort of whispers
Yeah,
to
it
you.
just
Yeah.
whisper, yeah. I don't whisper.
I've heard like a number of people who say that, like, an idea whispers what it wants to be. Like, I want to be a play. And you're like, oh no. But for me, I think I sometimes do that as well, but more often, I think what's interesting, when a screenplay, movies are all external for the most part. Tree of Life might be an example of an internal film, but movies are written externally. You write a screenplay, and it's what is seen and heard, and nothing else. I mean, in a screenplay, you don't say, she was remembering her mother, and unless you can see that on someone's face, you don't really write those details. So it's all external. And that's an interesting sort of exploration, while novels have the opportunity to be internal, that we can spend 100 pages inside the thoughts of somebody, and which is pretty powerful in that way. So for me, I think that's where my writing would tend to go when an idea is more internal, or tending to go that way, then that becomes prose as opposed to a screenplay. While action and bigger ideas and things like that, bigger. Well, I say I don't mean bigger. I mean more visual ideas end up becoming a screenplay.
So I have a question then, because you recently released a film, like maybe a year and a half ago.
Yes.
There was an adaptation of 2 of your short stories, kind of
Right.
brought together. So how did you handle the adaptation of your own work in that way? Where you, I assume, because I've read the stories, they have
Yeah.
an internal.
They do.
They have an interiority to them. Did you find that you had to lose some of that because you could only focus on the external visual elements, or did you struggle to find a way to take those interior moments and find ways to articulate them visually?
Well, I think the thing is, and I think you guys will probably see this when in your own writing. How many of you guys are writers, by the way? Like a good chunk of you, okay. But even like in your own writing, and also in films that you watch and books that you read, it's like what Manuel said earlier about concrete details. Like it's not a good, like someone saying, a man is walking on the beach and saying, the loneliness, and loneliness touches me, and you're like, okay, this is getting pretty dull. But if that man sees a jellyfish and gets down to the jellyfish and sees it, struggling and drying up, or a squirrel dead side of the road, all of a sudden those emotions have something concrete and they mean more, and they relate to being alive more. And that way, so I find screenwriting forces me to go to that visual. Because I can't say what that man's thinking. I have to show him walking down the beach. I have to show him finding that jellyfish, and I have to, and as a director, I have to work with the actor, like, how are we going to demonstrate this? How are we going to show this loneliness without the man saying, I am lonely, like the dying jellyfish. And that's a really cool challenge. It is sort of an interesting thing. Like, you have to constantly find the visual and the sharp dialogue that expresses what you might have otherwise had someone saying or reminiscing or even reflecting on how they feel. In film, we don't get too many people like, this is how I'm feeling, and I gotta talk about it. Usually doesn't make for good cinema.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Are y'all going to be doing any panels or readings for Texas Book Festival, and when and where can we attend those?
I don't know when or where.
I know. I do. So we're actually on a panel together, 4 o'clock on Saturday, called.
No, is it 4? I thought it was at 10:30.
I think it's at 10:30.
Oops. Is it 10:30? Oh, good. All right. I just announced that incorrectly yesterday. So 10:30. Dang, I would have missed it. 10:30 on Saturday, called "Everything Goes to Hell." What is it? Like setting the.
No, what is it?
Setting things on fire?
No, something loose.
Hell broke loose.
When all hell breaks loose.
And that's it.
We're professional wordsmiths. And they didn't come up with the title.
Yeah, we did not. And then in the evening, Manuel's doing the lip crawl thing, which is super fun. If you guys haven't done the lip crawl, it's one of the most fun aspects of the Texas Book Festival.
Yeah, I think it's great because it allows you to, I like being able to go see authors do stuff that's not just reading or answering questions. They're forced to do strange, awkward seeming tasks.
Yeah, in bars.
In bars where you can easily drink.
Yeah.
And then I had, right after the panel with Owen, I'm on a panel, authors and their dogs, with Jamie Attenberg and Eileen Miles and Kristen Arnett.
And I'm at a panel at 4, which is like writers who write about Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, yes, so we are doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah,
told
Sunday.
to show, on Sunday I'm doing, I don't know any of the details for Sunday, but I was told to let people know the Waller Creek, there's a Waller Creek celebration coming up next week where they have art and architecture exhibits. One of the architecture exhibits is a big kraken coming out of Waller Creek by Easy Tiger.
Oh, cool. Based
on a story that they asked me to write. Well, they said, do you have anything that you could write about a creek? And I said, here's a story about a kraken. And so some of the story is etched into the kraken, and
cool.
Easy Tiger, I think, is gonna have like a special drink. I don't know.
The Manuel Gonzales.
I hope not. That's gonna taste like athlete's foot. Not that I have.
Oh, and you had a question too, yes?
Yeah.
I did. I'm free Manuel. I was just curious where you got your idea for writing about the Bureau. It sounded like it was a book about like in the Bureau was about like women kind of like fighting back from harassment. I don't know how you described it. You just said it's something.
Yeah, so the regional office, it's
Regional office.
it's kind of like no, that's fine. It's an organization that battles the forces of evil, like actual like superhero, but they train at-risk women who have powers to do that, and then some members, disgruntled members of the regional office, break off and they try to bring it down. But the idea for it, I just had, it's not in the novel anymore, but the first thing I started writing was about the guy, Henry, going to a detention center to collect this woman, Rose, as like recruitment. And she was at the detention center because she's just a bit of a delinquent, but in the best way, as we saw. But like he gives her his shtick about how like, I'm going to tell you a story, and the story is your story, and it's going to change your life, and she doesn't give a fuck, so she smashes his foot, shoves him, and then starts running and breaks out of the detention center, and as he's chasing after her, he thinks to himself, if I let this girl go, the boys back at regional are going to give me shit about it for weeks. And then I was like, oh, I guess there's a regional. There's regional. and then later in that chapter, he's worried about, because he feels disaffected with his job, and he just walks away from it, and he's wondering what's going to happen, because you don't just walk away from the regional office, and he wonders who's going to come after him, and he thinks about goons with like batons and guns, but then he also thinks about Sarah with the dark hair and the mechanical arm, and I was like, oh, somebody in this book has a mechanical arm. And then I just was like, oh, I guess I know what kind of world I'm in, and that's where. So I had no idea what any of it was until 6 drafts later. And then I was like, this is the book that I was writing. And then I had to write it 2 more times. Yeah, Charlotte.
Can you tell me about the one-page salon?
Yeah, One Page Salon, which Manuel has read at several times. Actually, a number of people here have. So the first Tuesday of every month at the North Door, which is just on the east side of I-35, right around 6th Street. We have a salon where writers and filmmakers and poets and musicians present basically 1 page worth of a work in progress. And there's usually about 5 or 6 people who present. It's super fun. It's really casual. They answer a few questions, then they read something that they've got, and then we hang out. We hang out, we drink, and we get to know each other. And it's a great sort of cross-pollination of different creative circles. Sometimes someone will Skype in, which is super fun. And yeah, you guys should come. The next one's Tuesday.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and also Owen is an expert at cross-pollinating in all senses of the word. I think there's only one sense of the word.
Yeah.
But all of them. No, he's really good at bringing disciplines together for fun times. So I highly suggest the One Page
Salon. Yeah. And if anyone's interested in presenting or reading, just let me know. It'd be really fun. I'm always looking for more folks. So.
Yeah, and actually, before I left, I was teaching a workshop here just on my own, and some of my students took over a one-page salon, and all of them read for just a page, and it was a great time. And it was a really supportive crowd, except for Owen, who often booze.
Only if you deserve it.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So you wrote about the hollow earth theory. What attracts you to conspiracy theories, and why is this man attracted to a conspiracy theory in particular?
You know, I got a little obsessed with 2 things. I got obsessed with hollow earth theory and the Book of Job.
Okay.
And that's kind of where the book happened. But I used to have a big, glorious times drinking red wine and going down rabbit holes into the internet of especially things that seem unbelievable, and yet you find communities of people who believe them. I think maybe humanity's secret power, or maybe it's just a sense, like we're aware of our ability to see and smell and touch, and they're fantastic. But we have the ability to believe, and I don't think we talk about that. Like we can believe things. We believe things that we know aren't true. Like when we scream at a movie, Or we cry because an actor on screen is dying. Well, we know they're not dead, right? We know they're not, and yet we cry because we are allowing ourselves to believe something that we know not to be true, which also affects elements of patriotism or religion. And it can be a good or bad thing. I think it's a gasoline of power that we have. But we recognize it most when we see someone believing something that's so ridiculous. So when you do see someone say, no, I believe the earth is flat, or I believe the earth is hollow, you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. It's okay to believe in accepted world religions or something, but that's kind of crazy. And I think it allows for this kind of interesting inspection. Also, though, I think, hollow earth is, for people who did believe it, it's this question of like, what lies at the center of our planet? And my character Oliver is asking that same Jobian question of like, what's at the heart of everything? Is there a beating heart to the universe, or is the universe cold and apathetic? Are we the only, us little wriggling humans, the only people, the only aspect of compassion? Did we invent compassion? And did we invent the concept of justice? Is that just something we made up? Are we the kindest thing in the universe? That's very scary, isn't it? And I think sometimes, like in moments of beauty, we don't feel that. We feel that there's something, there's meaning or beauty of something. And that's the questions, I think, that led me to the whole earth.
Also, if you look at your feet, they're curved, which really only makes sense if we're standing inside a hollow, curved earth. And the entrance to the hollow earth is at the North Pole. There's also, I fell down this rabbit hole.
Everything he's saying is right.
Yeah, I fell down this rabbit hole in '99.
Oh.
And the flat earth, although there's the rapper who believes that the earth is flat. Pop. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is always giving him shit. But yeah, the Flat Earth Society is also a fascinating jaunt down interesting way of looking at it. Yeah.
I'd like to hear about your creative process and how, if the way you approach it, if that defines your style, or if you don't think you have a style whenever you're approaching a new project.
What a great question. Do you want to go first, or you want me to?
I don't like that question. No, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. My creative process is, it depends a little bit on what I'm writing. I'm a little more disciplined may be the wrong word. I'm a little more formal about screenwriting. I think because I kind of work in LA, so like I write out outlines and treatments, and I turn them in, and I get notes and everything. And I'm making sure this is something I can eventually sell and stuff like that, which it can be fun in some ways, but it also can be a little bit of a constraint. In prose and other writing, I go nuts. I allow myself to get it all down, and I write horrible, weird sentences. I like the idea that it's a party, and you just let everybody come to this. There's no bouncer. Let everyone in, because what eventually happens is you get, of course, the nice people who show up at all the parties, the clean sentences, the acceptable ideas, they show up. But then after a while, when people say, there's no bouncer at the door, the crazy people show up at your party. They're like, oh my God, free booze? And they come in, and they've got horrible, weird ideas, and they've never gone into a party because they're usually not allowed to. Those are the ideas that we've trained ourselves not to say out loud. Those things, and they come in, and I let them in. They're offensive and weird and strange, but some of them are brilliant. And some of them are like, oh, I didn't think I could have that person in my house. But now they're here, and I start building my party around them. But I never show that draft to anybody. Nobody sees it. And then later I'll revise it and revise it and revise it. But it's only like I have to have a draft for me that I know no one will see, so that I can write things that I would be terrified if someone saw. Both bad writing, but also weird confessions and maybe offensive ideas, whatever those are. And that, I think, does a little bit defines my style, because I like my writing best, and I like writing best when I'm going a little crazy.
Yeah, I do that too. There are no parties allowed. I like things quiet. Actually, there are pictures of me as a little boy at my parents' family Christmas party, where I'm sitting on the steps with my hands up my ears. I did not like all my loud cousins. I Mainly what I've been doing lately is tricking myself into not paying attention to the thing I'm writing as I'm writing it, so that I can't see what came before or what comes after. I can only see what's right in front of me, so I don't think too much about it. So I do a lot of handwriting. I painted one wall of my office at the university with whiteboard paint, so I could just whiteboard stories out. That's how I wrote the story, the Grandmother Revisited story. I wrote that on the whiteboard, and I would just write until I ran out of space, and then type it up, and then erase it, and then keep writing. And sometimes I'll do typewriter, sometimes I'll just talk into a phone because I can keep maybe 5 words in my head at once, so I lose sight of the thing that I wrote. Because I'm finding lately that I'm going back too much, or I'm getting stymied by the fact that I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. And so if I take all of that away and I just do next without thinking about it, it's not always very good, but it gets me to write. Because I always tell students especially that if you don't get it onto the page, you can't do anything with it. You can have it in your head and do all the things that you want to in your head, but it doesn't, like, it's not a real thing. So you can't fix it, you can't edit it, you can't make it better, you can't find the really bright, interesting pieces of it. There are some writers, I think Coleridge, I don't know, they're like those poets who were out by the Lake District in England. I think they would walk around high on opium and compose poems in their head, but I don't have opium.
Willie's is right next door.
They don't have opium either. At least if you ask them for opium, they tell you they don't carry it. So yeah, I don't believe that you can really do very much with your work until you get it onto the page, and so it's just a matter of getting myself free to get shit onto the page so that I can make it better. Any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah.
Last question. Better be good, by the way.
I'm going to ask for advice for, there are some writers, and myself included, who have an idea in their head and they try to write it, but they always have that one voice that says, no, this is terrible. It's not going to be good, you should revise it. So then you go back and revise it and you're like stuck in the same spot for a long time. How did you, if you ever had that problem, get over that?
Yeah, that voice in your head that says that thing is terrible, you fire that voice. You kick that voice in the teeth. I mean, quite honestly, like, I think that voice can be great during editing and is a valuable thing. You know, the way I put it, this is going to go back to what we were talking about before and leans into what Manuel was talking about too. You remember when you're a kid, like I have this 8-year-old son, and you make up, we used to play this game where I make up a word and go, hey, what's a guapalop? And you go, oh, the guapalops. They live in the clouds, and they've got orange, and you just go off, you know, constantly making up what a guapalop was. And if you say any word, you do the same thing. And you ask him to think of something, he's always thinking of things. Then you ask someone who's 25, saying, hey, tell me what a guapalop is. They go, I said, it can be anything. There's no wrong answer. Just tell me what a guapalop is. You know this, like, I can't think of anything, which is always a lie, right? Because the amount of synapses firing in our brains at any time, we are constantly thinking of a billion things. What happens around puberty is we start to say no to every idea. It's not a bad thing, right? Because it keeps your pants on in public, which my son has problems doing, or you don't, you know, say outrageous. Like, it's good to have that filter that we develop. But for writers, we have to be like an 8-year-old, that we have to kind of go, I'm just going to go. And there's no such thing as a bad idea, or even a good idea. There's just ideas on paper. And as Manuel, one of the things Manuel didn't talk about that I love about his process is he leans into what he doesn't know. He leans into, like, I think this is bad. I'm going to go for it. I'm doubling down. I'm going to write more. And he just goes into it. Like, yeah, come on, bring it on. And that's a great thing. And then he discovers things like, some part of my brain told me there's a girl with a mechanical arm, or there's a regional office. And that's how he's constantly discovering a book. Is almost as if it's out there somewhere, and he's just got to reach around in the dust until he finds it. And that's amazing. So your idea, it might be horrible. I don't give a shit. Write it. You know, like, because you know what is amazing? Existence beats perfection every time. A perfect idea is an idea that's never written down. An idea on paper, though, that exists. So, yeah, you just got to fire that idea and write.
Or you can say, oh, that was bad. Voice, watch this shit. That's what I did.
That's the doubling down.
Like one of the stories in the collection I came up with because I was teaching high school English and bad at it and miserable and grading 100 essays in December before winter break, and I was failing at writing a novel that I'd written like 7 drafts of, and I was like, this shit sucks. It's 1 in the morning and I have these crappy essays. I need to take a dumb world I created. And then I ran out of ideas, and then, but a year later, I was like, oh, I know what happens in that world now. But like, I wouldn't have ever come up with that story if I didn't like just challenge myself to what's the dumbest fucking sentence. The sentence is, we finally bagged that piece of shit swamp monster when the robots attacked. Right? I mean, that's a pretty dumb fucking sentence, right?
He's built a career on sentences like that.
I had no idea what was gonna happen. I was like, swamp monsters, robots? All right, we'll see. Come on this journey with me, brain.
Yeah, the weird part about writing is, this is probably anything from marriage to dancing to living day to day, is you fail and fail and fail and fail, and then something comes out of it.
How is your 26th marriage going?
It's all right. Actually, not so good.
Next one, pal. Next one.
Like at 27. Ladies.
Nobody does that headflip anymore. It's dead. Thanks, guys, for coming out and for hosting and for being such a generous audience. Thanks, Owen, for joining me up here on stage.
Yeah, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, Manuel Gonzales.
And their books are for sale.
Their books for sale.
Travel people.
I'm sure Owen would be happy to sign both his book and mine.